This video is going to cover the topic of dividing fractions, this time part 2. Be sure to put the date and topic at the top of your page. The essential question for this video is 2 parts. How do we divide a fraction by a whole number, and how do we divide a fraction by a fraction? Be sure that's written clearly at the top of your page. In the last video, we talked about dividing a whole number by a fraction. That is when the dividend is a whole number and we are using a fraction as a divisor. This time we continue to explore dividing fractions, but in our first case, the fraction will be the dividend and a whole number will be the divisor, and in the second, both the dividend and the divisor will be fractions. We'll start with a fraction divided by a whole number. So let's say we want to divide 1/2 by 4. That would mean we are trying to find the value if we cut 1/2 into 4 groups. The number sentence is listed here, 1/2 divided by 4, and we're trying to find the quotient. And I'll start by drawing a model for this. And remember, since we're using our grid paper spirals, we can use the grid to our advantage here. So I drew a 4x4 square that you can follow along and do the same. Now we're starting with 1/2, right? That's our dividend. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill in, let me change colors here, fill in 1/2 of this model, right? To show that we're starting with, but I wanna cut this into 4 equal parts. And so going the other direction, I'm gonna just say, okay, well, here's 1, 2, 3, 4 sections, right? So if I have 1/2 and I divide it into 4 groups, I'm gonna go ahead and look like I've done before at this section, right? And this is one section out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tiles now that I have, right? So 1/2 divided by 4 is 1/8. Let's try another one. So we have 3 friends that want to share equally 2/3 of a pound of popcorn. And the question is, how much popcorn will each friend get? I know this is a division problem because I see that people want to equally share something, right? So I'm dividing it into parts. And I know that the students are sharing the popcorn. So this is our dividend. That's what's getting shared. And I know that we want to divide it into 3 parts for 3 friends. So that's our divisor. That's what we're dividing it by, right? So our number sentence here would be 2/3 divided by 3, right? And just like before, we'll start with our model. And just like before, I'm using my grid lines to help me. I made a 3x3 box. And I'm going to go ahead and fill in 1, 2 of those sections. We'll do it yellow for popcorn. We'll say this is the popcorn, right, that our friends are sharing. But our friends we have 3 of them, right? So we want to divide it so that there's one for one friend, 1 section for the other friend, and 1 section for the third friend. Each friend, right, here's friend 1, each friend is getting this amount of popcorn. And they're getting 2 tiles, 2 sections out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the quotient is 2/9. And of course, that's 2/9 of the pound, right, that they had to start. And you might be noticing something, right? You might notice that this model looks a lot like our brownie pan model that we used for multiplication. And in fact, you are sharing the popcorn into 3 equal parts. So each student is getting 1/3 of the 2/3 of a pound. And of course, we know that is 2/9. So there is a connection here between these 2 things that we're working with. And you'll always want to keep that connection in mind as we continue working with dividing fractions. But now let's look at what happens if we divide a fraction by yet another fraction. So with this example, right, let's look at 3/4 divided by 1/4. This time, the dividend and the divisor are both fractions. So we're trying to see if we have 3/4 of something and we split it into groups of 1/4 each, how many groups we could make. And as always, I'm going to start with a model. This time I'm going to make a 4x4 box. So my first step will be to divide my model into 4ths, and that's because there are 4ths in my dividend, right? So I'm going to go ahead and cut this into 4ths, 4 sections. We're used to doing that by now. And I'm going to shade in 3 of them, 1, 2, 3, because that's what I'm starting with, 3/4. That's my dividend. My divisor is 1/4. So what I'm trying to figure out is how many 1/4ths there are in 3/4. Well, lucky for us, this has been cut into 4ths. So I can see here is 1 fourth, right? This whole row is a fourth. I see another fourth here and another fourth here, right? A fourth here, a fourth here, and so on. So that means there are 1, 2, 3, 3 fourths. My quotient would be 3, right? And that's pretty intuitive, right? Here's another example. So let's say I have 1/2 of a yard of ribbon and I need 1/6 of a yard to make a hair tie, right? Or a bandana, or whatever I want to do, headband. How many hair ties can I make? The first thing I need to decide is what's getting divided by what, right? So I have 1/2 of a yard and I'm cutting that into sixths, right? So that means this here is what I'm starting with, right? My 1/2 is my dividend. And I'm cutting it into sections that are 1/6 each. I'm trying to see how many of those fit into 1/2. So that makes this my divisor. Now, it's not because one came first in the story, right? Sometimes we get confused with that. It's because I looked to see what I was starting with and what I was cutting it into, right? So I'm going to be doing a division problem. And my division problem is 1/2 divided into sixths. And I'm trying to figure out how many I can make. And once again, starting with my model, right? I have my model set up here. This time it's a little larger so I can show it more easily. So a 6x6 would work here for this. And I'm gonna just fill in where my fabric is, right? So I don't have a whole yard, I have 1/2 a yard, right? So that's this. I'm cutting it into 2 and filling in 1/2 to represent my fabric. And now I'm trying to see how many sixths there are. Well, luckily for me, I drew this as a 6x6 grid already. So I can say, well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections, right? Here's a sixth, another one, and so on, right? Each one of these is 1/6, and so is this. Takes up it's one row out of 6, right? It takes up 1/6 of the space. So if this was my ribbon, I could cut it just like that, and each one of those would make a hair tie, which means in the end, I was able to make 1, 2, 3 hair ties. So 1/2 divided by 1/6 is 3. And of course, as we go forward, we're going to look for patterns and we're going to try to come up with a rule that we can use, right? We won't always be drawing the models, but it's a good way for us to start to sort of notice patterns. And if we needed to, we could always use that as an option going forward if we're stuck and having a hard time remembering what to do. The models will always help. So remember that the essential question for this video was how do we divide a fraction by a whole number and a fraction by a fraction? We saw examples of both of those in model form, and we will continue to talk about this as we go forward. Be sure to have your notes ready.